today's meeting for later sharing. Closed captioning is available in English or Spanish, and I think a colleague is going to be putting these links into the chat. So if you're looking for closed captioning in either English or Spanish, that is available to you. If you have any questions or challenges accessing that captioning, please let us know. And before we begin, just want to take a moment to share OHA's acknowledgements to community, starting with the tribal lands that we all call home. We acknowledge that what we now call Oregon is the ancestral lands of many tribes, those now federally recognized and not. We are here because this land was occupied and its traditional people were displaced by colonists and settlers. As settlers and our guests, we recognize the strong and diverse Native communities in our region today, from tribes both local and distant, and offer respect and gratitude for their stewardship of these lands throughout the generations. And I invite you all to learn a little bit more about the tribal communities in your part of the state, and you can do so by clicking on that link, nativeland.ca, and there's a really cool map there where you can learn more about your part of where you live. OHA acknowledges there are institutional, systemic, and structural barriers that perpetuate inequity and have silenced the voices of communities over time. OHA is committed to partnerships, co-creation, and co-ownership of solutions with communities disproportionately affected by health issues, so they can actively participate in planning, implementing, and evaluating efforts to address health issues. OHA recognizes community-engaged health improvement is a long-term and dynamic process. OHA is striving to engage with communities through deliberate, structured, emerging, and best practice processes. OHA is striving to make engagement with public health effective for communities, especially those communities that experience institutional, systemic, and structural barriers. So thank you again all for being here with us and with each other to share and learn how we can advance health equity in our state. As I mentioned, today is the first in a series of 8 events that we'll be putting on over the next year to highlight the strategies and activities identified in the Healthier Together Oregon plan, or State Health Improvement Plan. And the purpose of these events is to convene partners like all of you from around the state who are working to advance health equity in your community. This is an opportunity to dig a bit deeper into the strategies and activities that were identified in this plan, share examples of work in progress, and connect with others. In terms of our agenda for the next hour and a half, I'll first provide a brief overview of Healthier Together Oregon and the Healthy Communities Implementation Area. Then we'll hear from 3 fabulous examples of partners who are implementing some of the strategies within this implementation area. So we're joined today by guests from Hala Mentors, Department of Land Conservation and Development, the United Way of the Columbia Willamette, and OHA's Public Health Division. Just want to give a special welcome to our guests this morning. And then finally, through the magic of Zoom, I'm hoping we'll have some time for breakouts, which will be an opportunity for you all to connect with other people in the state who are invested in doing this work. So before we get started, just a brief overview of Healthier Together Oregon, or the State Health Improvement Plan. This is a framework that really summarizes what is in this plan. So for those who are less familiar, Healthier Together Oregon, or HTO, is a 5-year plan to advance health equity in our state, and specifically for 5 priority populations, those being Black, Indigenous, people of color and tribal communities, people with low income, people with disabilities, people who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, or other, and people who live in rural areas. 5 priorities were identified for this plan by the partnership, which is a community-based steering committee that the Oregon Health Authority convenes. And the partnership, they are the decision makers about this plan. So they set the vision, they identified the priorities, and they developed the plan. The 5 priorities that we'll be working on in this particular plan over the next 4 and some years are institutional bias, access to equitable preventative health care, adversity, trauma, and toxic stress, behavioral health, and economic drivers of health, or things like housing, living wage, food insecurity, transportation, etc. There are 8 implementation areas that were created to organize this work. And those areas really attempt to speak to the interconnectedness and interrelatedness of those 5 priority areas. And I'll share a little bit more about those 8 areas on the next slide. We'll be measuring our progress in this plan through 16 key indicators. And there were 62 strategies. So these are the actions. This is the work that we'll be digging into a little bit today. This is the work that we can do together to make progress in these priority areas. If you haven't done so, I do encourage you all to visit Healthier Together Oregon. That's the website for this work, and there's a lot of information about all of this on that page. So getting into a little bit more detail about the 8 implementation areas, and I'll just provide a real high level summary of some of the strategies that are in this plan. Starting in the top left-hand corner, or equity and justice. Strategies here really speak to the work that state agencies can and need to do to address structural racism and other biases in our systems. Healthy communities, that's where we will be spending our time today. And there are really 3 categories of strategies here related to the built environment, related to community resilience, and finally, economic wellness. Housing and food, there are a few strategies here related to things like affordable housing and home ownership, use of housing first principles, and then 3 strategies that speak to how we can address food insecurity through food systems work, access to food supports, and coordinated assessment and planning as it comes to food. Behavioral health, a few strategies here that speak to how we can address stigma for behavioral health services, and then strategies that really speak to the continuum of services for behavioral health from prevention to treatment to recovery. Healthy families, the strategies here speak to how we can better support caregivers in our state, those of us who are caring for people across the lifespan, as well as ways that we can ensure access to culturally and linguistically responsive preventative health care. Healthy youth, these strategies really speak to the work that we can do within the school setting, ways that we can enhance access to preventative behavioral health and oral health care services for youth, as well as ways that we can work together to dismantle structural racism and other biases that our youth experience within the school setting. Workforce development, the strategies here attempt to create a culturally and linguistically responsive workforce, particularly in health and social services. And then finally, technology and health, just a few strategies here that speak to the role of telehealth, which obviously has become very important this past year, electronic health records, and community information exchange. So again, we'll be getting into the details of all of these areas at future HTO and action events, and hope that you can join us for those to explore these other areas. But for today, we'll be focusing specifically in the healthy communities implementation area. There are 12 strategies in this particular area spanning 3 distinct categories related to built environment, community resilience, and economic wellness. Built environment refers to the built infrastructure in which we live, and so this would include things like access to safe and healthy housing, schools, places of employment. It refers to how we get around and options for walking and biking and playing, access to healthy foods and clean air, for example. Community resilience refers to our sense of connection and belonging within our community, our trust that our community, our neighbors, and our society have our back. And finally, economic wellness refers to the access we have to financial health through employment, high education or education opportunities, livable wages, and access to financial supports and services. So let's start with built environment. There are 4 strategies in this particular area. The first is centering BIPOC and tribal communities in decision-making about land use planning and zoning in an effort to create safer, more accessible, affordable, and healthy neighborhoods. So examples of what this could look like might be creation of zoning laws, increasing affordable housing stock, and reducing density of tobacco and alcohol retail outlets. And you'll hear a little bit more about this work from our partners at Department of Land Conservation and Development today. Next strategy is to provide safe, accessible, and high-quality community gathering places, such as parks and community buildings. So this could include things like looking at joint use agreements to efficiently utilize existing facilities, enabling partners to share the cost of these spaces, focusing on covered outdoor spaces, particularly important as we've been recovering from COVID, and investing in planting trees, community gardens, and other natural spaces. The next strategy is to increase affordable access to high-speed internet in rural Oregon. Again, another strategy that has become so important in COVID as we've shifted a lot of our, the way we work and the way we learn and the way we access medical care. Example activities here really are around increasing investment for broadband infrastructure, both funding that comes from public and private sectors. And the final strategy within this category of built environment is around co-location of support services for low-income people and families. And I think this refers to both like the physical co-location as well as how we can be better coordinated in our service delivery to address agency time and the time required for people to access services in our very complicated system. So this could include things like co-location of housing assistance, food banks, and other supports, considering use of tele-access to services, expansion of electronic documents, capitalize on repurposing of state buildings, I think especially timely as we start to consider what a return to work looks like. And there are lots of conversations going on about how we can reuse these buildings, not only those buildings owned and leased by the state, but a variety of places that we work. And of course, ensuring that services are accessible by active transportation. So for those who are interested in learning a little bit more about some of these strategies, here are just a few of our favorite resources related to the built environment, and there are a lot more. So we would love to hear and see your favorite resources related to built environment. So this is a great opportunity to share some of those resources in the chat. And we'll be compiling your ideas for future work on this plan. So really appreciate your help in putting together resources. And we'll also be sure to share these resources with folks today. Moving on to community resilience. There are 5 strategies within this category. The first of which is to expand culturally and linguistically responsive community-based mentoring and peer-delivered services. So this could include things like intergenerational mentoring, connecting youth to caring adults, both in and outside of the school setting, and of course, providing sustainable funding. And really excited to hear a little bit more about this work from Hala Mentors today. They'll be speaking to this strategy. Developing community awareness of toxic stress, its impact on health, and the importance of protective factors. So this would include things like incorporating community involvement in the development and distribution of this knowledge, focusing on positive attributes, you're really using an asset frame when talking about this, and delivering this information in a variety of different formats through public service announcements, workshops, etc. The next strategy is to enhance community resilience through promotion of art and cultural events. So, increasing programs for a variety of communities, supporting use of sweat lodges, pipe ceremonies, and storytelling for tribal communities, providing opportunities for storytelling, drama, music, and art, and of course, ensuring that there is culturally and linguistically responsive outreach about these events. The next strategy is related to climate resilience, particularly among priority populations. And you'll hear a little bit more about this work from friends today from United Way and the Oregon Health Authority Public Health Division. There's lots of great resources related to climate resilience, including the Oregon Climate Change Adaptation Framework. And you'll hear a little bit more about this today. And then finally, the last strategy in this bucket is related to expansion of programs that address loneliness and increase social connection, particularly in older adults. So this could look like connecting community health improvement plans to the AAA plans on aging in your community, providing funding and expanding social support programs for priority populations, addressing transportation barriers, particularly in rural areas, expansion of the senior loneliness line, all sorts of great ideas here. And again, here are some of our favorite resources, short list. So please let us know some of the your favorite ideas and resources as it relates to community resilience. All right. And the last category related to economic wellness. There are 3 strategies in this bucket. The first is to invest in workforce development and higher education opportunities for priority populations. So this would look like supporting job training and continuing education opportunities, increasing financial supports for students to address the cost of living and cost of higher education, increasing access to accredited trade programs, and expanding access to more flexible work opportunities. The second strategy here is related to strengthening economic development, employment, and small business growth, particularly in underserved communities. So this could look like increasing access to capital in support of local small businesses and entrepreneurship, particularly in rural communities, developing cross-sector business groups to promote collaboration and learning, improving access to employment, especially for people with disabilities, and developing incentives to encourage private investment in underserved communities. And finally, the last strategy here is related to enhancing financial literacy and access to financial services and support. So a lot of really diverse activities in this particular strategy, everything from increasing Social Security, disability assistance for people with disability, or increasing access to the earned income tax credit and free tax preparation services, the use of individual development accounts, the use of paid family leave, increasing educational programs and supports, especially for BIPOC and tribal communities who have been targeted by predatory payday lending and other predatory lending services, and finally increasing financial literacy training, particularly in education. And so here are some of just a few of our favorite resources related to economic well-being. A lot of really interesting things here, and again, would love to see some of the other resources that you go to and think about some of the work that's going on in your community. All right, that was a lot of talking, and I just want to take a look at the chat here. And Liz or Heather, are there any particular questions that have come up, or?
I would just say, you know, we covered a lot, you just covered a lot of information, and just to let folks know that we will be sending out, you know, there's a lot of links here, a lot of great links you provided around community resilience and built environment. So we're definitely going to be sending out the links to the recording once that's available, and also to the slides. So you all will have this, and please feel free, you know, to share it with folks who may not be able to attend today and maybe, you know, interested in collaborating in any part of this work.
Great. Thanks, Liz. All right. Well, I am really excited to hear from our partners and some of the examples that they have to share. The first example that we were going to share, I think, was related to climate resilience. And Alyssa, I'm just curious, is Christy with us yet? If not, happy to circle back to that example.
Yeah, I think I don't see that she's on yet.
Okay.
Would it be easy to do a different group first and then jump back?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Thank you.
For sure. So Kirsten and Evan would love to turn it over to you all. I'll let you introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your work. I also just want to check, did you want me to stop sharing so you can pull up your slides?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. I may have still been working on them because I thought we had another minute in the order of appearance.
Nothing like winging it.
We're going with what we have. Everyone, good morning. Thanks for inviting us, Christy. My name is Kirsten Green. I'm the Deputy Director with the state's Department of Land Conservation and Development. And I'm with Evan Manvell, who is a land use and transportation planner and so much more, who's been helping us with the project you'll hear about today, leading many, many parts of it. So we're grateful for his leadership with the policy office at the agency. So we, you know, this state enterprise, or the state as a whole, so 40,000 employees plus or minus, obviously led by Governor Kate Brown and the Department of Administrative Services. As the governor is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, DLCD also commits itself in entirety to identifying and reducing disparities based on race, ethnicity, and disability. So this diagram is one that I kind of drew up and someone else made look better when I was listening to our director, Jim Rue, talk about the various levels and layers of community experience and planning. But really it all starts from equity, and whether we're responding to climate change or recovering from deep economic and community impacts of COVID-19, equity is just at the center of our thinking.
Okay.
Yes.
Kirsten, I don't think you're sharing our slides.
Oh, what am I sharing? Am I sharing anything?
We're just seeing your beautiful face.
Oh gosh, thank you for the compliment. You're very kind. Now you see a blush. Thank you, Evan. Okay, see, I don't go far without Evan. Thank you, sir. Now, how's that? Better? Yeah, thank you. All right, so this is the diagram I was speaking to. Thank you so much. So you can see there just whether we're responding to climate change, the effects of climate change, or economic recovery from COVID-19, equity is at the core. Our agency mission, if everyone is not total land use and community planning head that we are, and I know everyone's not, but everyone does live in community. So we touch directly or indirectly. Unfortunately, this work of this agency and the state's land use planning system touches your lives for better or worse. So our mission is, our small agency's mission, we're about 64 people, is to help communities plan for, protect, and improve the built and natural systems that provides a high quality of life for you, your family members, and your neighbors. In partnership with local governments to deliver those land use plans and zones, we foster sustainable and vibrant communities that protect our natural resource legacy for current and future generations in Oregon. Very mindful of and appreciate the land acknowledgement. We're very mindful of the land we're on and ceded and stolen lands, and also that It's our responsibility to care for those assets for current and future generations to come. We take this mission very seriously. Comprehensive land use planning is unique in the state of Oregon. So if you are sort of didn't know or moved from another state, this is the only state in the United States that has what's called comprehensive land use planning. That means that every city, and I'm telling you all this because I want you to advocate for your local land use plans. They really shape how our communities live and function. So whatever city or county you live in, your community has one. And it addresses assets like farm and forest, working lands, housing, employment, transportation, public facilities, parks, our beaches and dunes, community participation. So there's 19 land use planning goals in Oregon. And those came around about the time that Governor McCall, Tom McCall, in the early 70s, about 50 years ago now, and a bipartisan group of legislators passed this system. And it really was in part sort of working lands and environmental protections. So agricultural forest lands were being encroached upon, sprawl was happening. Governor McCall could see the risk to the future of current and future generations of Oregon and urged the legislature to pass Senate Bill 100, which means that, and after that, early group cohered 19 land use planning goals. They address, you can see that the images on the slide there, but farm and forest land, community participation, places to recreate. So the dispersion of access to parks and natural areas is within this domain. Economic development, adequate housing, constant struggle, much to say on that, but not today. And then estuaries and beaches and dunes that are public in Oregon, land use planning goals related to the preservation of those resources. We know that that inequity was at the core of the foundation of the state of Oregon, both treatment of Native American residents of the state and also Black Americans who weren't allowed to even live in the state, and then subsequent inequities as well. But through zoning, through other for other racial populations, through our zoning has been a tool to actually create disparities. So this is a zoning map. Some on the call today would be familiar with a process called redlining, and I won't go into it, but we know, and it's factually documented, that that zoning laws were actually created to maintain disproportionate outcomes based on race from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and pretty recently even into recent and current times. So these historical structures are still with us, and it is our agency's work to help communities undo these systems and provide more equitable outcomes. And these slides in part are taken from a series of slides that Evan and his team are giving through community conversations going on right now about climate change. And I think we hit that in a moment. But we know that because of some of this historical inequity, the racial wealth equity gaps are tremendous. Evan has put on there the disparities between white and black Oregonians' home ownership rates and the associated wealth gap. It's an inequitable situation, and we're committed to dismantling it to the greatest extent possible. So one of the examples that Christy invited us to talk to you all about today is about kind of the State Health Improvement Plan goal of creating rules advisory committee members that better reflect the state's population as a whole, but specifically for Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. So we take that also very seriously. And one of the processes we're in now is this climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking work. And this is not a talk about that work, so I have to just watch myself before I get too deep in it. We're quite obsessed about this these days, as we're also obsessed about climate change and mitigating it. This is a mitigation strategy to reduce greenhouse gases from the land use and transportation sector. This is how much we all drive and are forced to drive because there's not adequate walking, biking, or transit services in so many of our urban communities. So the process to impanel this 40-member advisory committee included defining priority populations, which are very akin to those that Christy mentioned for the State Health Improvement Plan. Black, Indigenous, people of color, tribal communities, low income, as she said, people with disabilities, LGBTQIA, rural communities, and also but specific focus on mobility limited and also people experiencing homelessness. Our land use planning program has not been good about even numerically recognizing the number of people who are homeless when we do our buildable lands inventory. So we've corrected that, we're correcting it, and working closely with PSU's Institute and others on really building in all community members so they're recognized and describing the needs of housing inventories at the local level. So we, to impanel this kind of a committee, it's not normal to have a 40-person committee. We're very grateful for those that are serving. 100 people applied, which was unusual, but we did also do some focused outreach based on the priority populations, personal phone calls. You've all kind of gone through it to make sure that your processes reflect the state's population as a whole. We really coded it demographically against the 8 metropolitan regions that will be regulated by this rule, and obviously Latino community members are well represented in the 8 metropolitan areas of Oregon, and so we wanted to make sure their voices was on too, and we're grateful for those that are serving. There are many contracts available for 6 members who said that without that support they would not be able to participate, and we're grateful for our administrative services division helping us figure out how to kind of do that. It's a bit new for the state, and I know that Oregon Health Authority has used that model as well. As part of the rulemaking process, this group, because it is so incredibly fantastic, the first thing we wanted them to do, asked them to do, was to help us define, the commission asked them to help define equitable outcomes. And so what's on the screen there is just a snip of that statement, and we can put some of these resources in the chat as well. But this includes specific outcomes for both climate change and community disparity. So for equity-related outcomes as well as climate-related outcomes, because this rulemaking is trying to do both at once: reduce greenhouse gases and increase equitable outcomes. So as Evans called out here, the promise, the commitment is to center the voices of community members and organizations representing those priority populations and recognize how intersectional discrimination compounds those disadvantages, to value those lived experience and qualitative information that people bring from their daily lives, and to assess, document, acknowledge, and address where past policies and the effects of climate change are harming or likely to perpetuate harm. So it's a pretty ambitious body of work that we're involved in, and we do invite you to join us in this in one way or another, or to send your kids, your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors who are interested or concerned about climate or equity our way, and look forward to helping them get engaged at the local or state level. This will take all of us. So specific to the equity outcomes, because of this rulemaking, we expect to see more accessible, safe, affordable, and equitable transportation choices for walking, biking, and transit, better dispersed, adequate, and affordable secure housing, and increased stability of priority populations against the forces of gentrification and displacement, which can occur when we make some of those positive improvements that people deserve. Property values go up, redevelopment can happen, and people can be displaced from the communities they call home and their social and cultural networks that help keep them healthy and strong. So very concerned about community stabilization as well as the risk of displacement. As I mentioned, we're in the process right now of community conversations. There's one next week centered on the community of Bend. You can see those dates. Eugene Springfield is coming up on May 19th, Salem Kaiser on May 25th, and you do not need to be living in those communities to participate. Notably, this afternoon, we have a good size showing of folks who have signed up for the what we call a green infrastructure webinar. The idea here is our communities necessarily will accommodate more people over time. Growth happens, population growth happens. How do we keep these communities humane from a mental health and a social wellness perspective? Providing places for people to gather, recreate, exhale. So that's the topic of the Green Infrastructure webinar this afternoon, and we invite you to join us and try and put that one in the chat as well. Make a note. And this is kind of cool what Evan's been doing for the community conversations. he's been comparing the number of registrants to the population as a whole. You can see that sort of at the meeting, people are wealthier, less likely to indicate they're living with a disability, more white and more homeowners than the average Oregonian. So we call that out. We say, look, of course you're here tonight because you're self-interested, but also please remember there's a great body of Oregonians that is not represented here tonight. We really ask people to keep those populations in mind. It's one of the reasons our 40-member focus group is helping us through this process and actually creating the rules, and certainly more focused outreach is warranted. Finally, and I'm just wrapping up here, we are turning to take these rules. We take them frequently in draft to our Land Conservation and Development Commission. I will say for everyone listening, there's going to be an opening on the commission. So please, I'm going to put a slide in here in a moment, which is how to access our listservs. But we're sad to see that former Vice Chair and Commissioner Katie Piermine will be rolling off the commission in the fall. She's gone to do global food relief work and wants to just put her full attention on that. So we'll have, at the end of her term, we'll have an opening for the Portland metropolitan area. So please join our commission, help regulate these outcomes from a statewide perspective. It's a great and committed group of folks representing different geographic areas in Oregon. And we just honestly need everybody in this to make our communities better. So I mentioned that I'd invite you to join and follow and critique DLCD's work at the top of our website, which we'll put in the chat. There's a news and notices link, and then you can sign up for all different kinds of notices. Specific to the one I've been talking about today is the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities Rulemaking process. But if you need any help at all to access those resources, please call or email me or Evan. And I think that is all we have, Christy, and I hope I didn't go over time.
Great, thank you so much, Kirsten and Evan. Just really fabulous work. So cool. All right, I think we probably have questions and comments for you. I'm gonna ask that we just pause, and we will make time for questions and answers of all of our guests, but I want to make sure we've got enough time. So if our lovely guests can just hold on and stay with us for a little bit.
No problem.
All right. So with that, I think let's move to HALA mentors, and I would love to introduce Eric Knox and Vicki Schwefferman. Hey guys. All right. Did you want you want to start with the video, or you want to introduce yourselves, or?
Eric, you're on mute.
My bad, y'all. My bad. All right. All right, y'all. My name is Eric Knox, and this is Vicki Schwefferman. And we work together as a team. She's an amazing woman and does an incredible work in terms of supporting us. And I thought one of the easiest ways to kind of roll out who and what we are is to probably start with a video and then kind of explain, sort of high level philosophically what we do. And then I'll turn it over to Vicki. She can sort of talk about the boots to the ground of what it looks like in our community. So with that, Christy, if you don't mind, can you cue up the video and play it?
Bigger than school, bigger than tutoring, bigger than sports, bigger than oneself, bigger than their expectations or your personal limitations, bigger than adversity, bigger than one's culture, bigger than you, bigger than me. Mentoring is exposure to possibility, and the possibilities are endless. HALA mentors, bring it.
All right, can you hear me? Okay, am I back? Okay, perfect. Yeah, you know, Hala is really, uh, I always tell people I'm the executive director and founder of Hala, but when I got Hala off the ground, I wasn't, even though I'm the founder, I wasn't trying to found anything. I was just trying to show up and be present. I mean, there's no news flash that inner Northeast Portland got gentrified. A lot of Black and brown families got pushed out to East Side, and I had, you know, at the request of some kids that had come actually out of my program that were working at I Have a Dream, they asked me to come out there and consult them. So I went out there for a couple of days at Alder Elementary, gave them my perspective, was walking back to my car at that point. I didn't even have an organization. They just knew they came out of my program. It had an impact in their life, and they were trying to live out of that sort of ethos. And so after 2 days of giving them my thoughts on what they could do in terms of impacting Black, brown, and indigenous kids, they followed me back out to my car and said, "You need to start a nonprofit." And I was like, well, you know, I was just unsure. Well, anyway, 2 weeks later, I had a nonprofit off the ground because I had a tour, because I was doing a lot of Black male identity stuff at HBCUs. And it was called the Holla If You Hear Me Tour. It was based off of Tupac Shakur's song. And so I truncated the name down from Tupac, Holla If You Hear Me, to Holla. And so Holla was really the call from these beautiful sisters that felt like they needed what I advised on their campus. And so we always say Holla was the call, and the work is the response. And so in true good, culturally responsive ways in which we do our work, I figured that the best way to describe who and what we are and do is really through a story. I grew up in Los Angeles, California. I am the product of my mom and my dad. The ironic thing about my mom was that her mom was Jewish from San Francisco. Actually, her parents started the NAACP in San Francisco. My dad grew up in the housing, my granddad, her dad grew up in the housing tenements of Harlem. She got a music scholarship to NYU, and he got a journalism scholarship to NYU. And he came from an extremely tough background, but he got a scholarship. He was brilliant. So they ended up at NYU together and fell in love. He was this real dark chocolate Black man from Harlem. She was this very white Jewish woman from San Francisco, and they decided they wanted to get married. And at that time, you can imagine in the 30s, there were only like 3 places that you could get married in terms of states. And so they decided that they would go to Mexico City and kind of restart their lives and build their marriage. And they went out there. He became an educator, and she got plugged into a very vibrant art community in Mexico City. Well, to make a long story short, my mom was the oldest woman, the oldest sibling in our home. And she was having a play date. She was 10 years old. And the dad came to pick up her friend that she was having a play date with, and he was happened to be a doctor. And so when he came to the door, my grandmother, her mom, opened the door. He noticed a lump on her breast, and he said, "You should go get," her name was Elizabeth. He said, "Elizabeth, you should go get that checked out." She went and got it checked out. Turned out she had breast cancer, and she was given like months to live. Well, 3 weeks later, she ended up dying. And my mom described, the way she described the funeral, she just said it was extremely sad and pensive. She couldn't believe that she had lost her mom. And she said that she never forgot that this Mexican man walked up to her and gave her a painting and just said, your mother was a tremendous artist. I just wanted to give you this painting because this reminded me of your mother's brilliance. So anyway, they end up, to make a longer story short, they end up moving to Los Angeles. And my mom kept that painting. She kept it her whole life, kept it so much that when I grew up, I saw that painting sat on our wall. And it was, to me, the ugliest painting. I just was not into art. I wasn't super creative. I didn't see the beauty in it. But my mom said that it just reminded her of her mom. And so she kept that painting. She didn't end up going to college. She struggled, not having her mom. But my mom was labeled in Inglewood, California. I'm from South Central LA. she was labeled Mother Teresa of Inglewood. She had a bleeding heart, and that's what she was. And so she would always organize these block parties. And one day she was organizing a block party, and at this time I was in college, and she was actually getting ready to get her house foreclosed on. She had lost her job. She racked up a ton of arrears, and she just didn't have a lot of resources. And if you ever go to my mom's house right now, my mom loves to do a lot of arts and crafts. So if you came to her house, she would walk you around her house and just tell you, just show you all her little arts and crafts stuff. That's just who my mom is. And if you go there a week later, she'll take you through everything all over again as if she never showed you it before. Well, she was organizing this block party, and she'd always get the neighborhood leaders to come to her house. She'd have a meeting, a dinner, and talk about what they were going to do. And her best friend actually had just moved away at the end of her block. And it was a new family that came in. And at this time, my mom was just really struggling. She was losing her house. She lost her power. In fact, she had candles and using that as lights for the dinner that night in her house, where somehow she scraped enough money, put the meal together, and she decided she would go down to the end of the block and invite this new family to the leadership meeting and, just kind of welcome them. So they come so they decide they'll take her up on the invitation. They end up going to the house, and my mom, of course, goes into showing them her arts and crafts. And finally, she gets to this painting. And my mother says, yeah, this is a painting a man gave me when I was in Mexico City. I was 10 years old. And, it means so much to me. I don't know who the guy was, but, all I know is, and she read the name of the signature at the bottom, and it was Diego Rivera. And he happened to be an art appraiser. And he said, are you serious? And she's like, yeah, Diego Rivera gave me this painting. She says, Claudia, do you know who Diego Rivera is? He goes, he's a famous Mexican artist. This painting would change your life. So my mother panicked, didn't realize the real worth of this painting or who even Diego Rivera was. But it was on a Friday, and I always tease my mom. I said, when you found that out, Mom, what did you do? She said, I went and bought me a gun, baby. She says, I got a gun. I put the painting in the closet, and I couldn't wait till Tuesday because Bonham and Buttersworth is an art auction on Sunset Boulevard, and that she was going to take the painting. So anyway, to make a longer story short, she said, I sit by that closet door, and I had that gun in my pocket, and I guarded that because she's like, baby, I was in Inglewood. You know how it is. Tuesday came along. She took it to Barnum and Bay. She took it to Bottoms and Buttersworth, and she ended up selling that painting in an art auction that absolutely changed her life. And I always say the story because it really encapsulates everything that we do here at Holla. Like when I grew up and I saw that painting was just another painting on the wall. For my mom, it had some sentimental value, but my mom didn't know the true value of that painting. But when she had that art appraiser come alongside her and explain who Diego Rivera was, her complete interaction with that painting changed. So when we talk about mentoring here, especially when we talk about Holla, and when we talk about being culturally responsive, culturally responsive is just the ability to learn from and relate successfully with people who are like us and different from us. And for us, it's the ability to infuse the cultural references and influences that impact the kids that we serve. And so we understand when we're walking alongside our kids, when they understand the true value of their worth, all of a sudden, everything in their life turns upside down. What ends up happening is the epiphany happens and we turn water into wine. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. In fact, we just did a survey. 88% of our kids say that when they have a strong relationship with their mentor, they feel powerful. And 92% of students say when they're walking with their mentor, they feel proud of their ethnic identity and racially who they are. 80% of them say they feel hopeful for the future. I hope you kind of understand this trajectory, right? Relationship is everything in our community. In fact, that is the taxonomy of our community, right? Relationships, there's no one size fits all, right? Like we don't have a formula. I don't even have a diagram. I wish I could give you one. But to be honest with you, if you want to know what kind of impact we're having on our kids, let me just tell you a story about a girl named HTO who had a very tough background, youngest of 23 kids, 23 siblings, didn't have much hope. I and a bunch of Hollis mentors stepped into her life, and I can tell you right now, she's on a full-ride Division I basketball scholarship. She got there academically, and a lot of people had written her off because the Yoakum last name carried a lot of baggage with it. So a lot of what we do here at Holla is walking alongside kids, sitting with their thoughts. We all understand that whatever you pay attention to grows, and we walk alongside these kids, and their lives are turned upside down as a result of it. And so we have 54 one-on-one matches. We service about 200 kids in our program. We're in 6 districts. We're not trying to get larger, we're trying to get smaller. We're not trying to go wider, we're trying to go deeper. It is not, you know, it's not about how big we are, but it's about how deep we are. We don't want to be 5 miles wide and 1 inch deep. We understand when you walk alongside kids and you make that kind of investment, the way we make that kind of investment, all kind of incredible stuff happens. So philosophically, that's how it happens. Practically, I'm going to turn it over to Vicki and let Vicki talk a little more about boots to the ground and what that looks like every day throughout the week.
Thank you, Eric. You know, I never like speaking after Eric because he brings the heart and he's the soul of this whole mentorship movement. But I'm honored to be with you all. I'm honored to just share a little bit of the details of the program. You know, as Eric mentioned, we show up in the lives of youth and their families, and we surround them with every possible resource it will take to help them thrive and succeed. And we do that through our mentorship program, but we also do it through enrichment programs. Enrichment programs could look very different depending on the level of support and the community support that comes to our door. But to give you some examples, we have a day in the life opportunities for youth to see what their career, what their life would look like if they were working in a physician's office, if they were working as an engineer, if they were an artist, if they were a technician, you name it. As Eric mentioned, you know, a lot of times in life, we, especially when it comes to our Black and brown youth and families, we hear a lot of no's, and Holla exists to say yes to those dreams and help kids and families be able to navigate their lives and thrive in the process. So we empower students, we empower families. Everything we do is built around representation, equity, and providing support. You know, I always like the saying growing up, if you can't see it, it's really hard to be it, right? Exposure is really, really important to the lives of youth and adults. So we aim at making sure that we do that. As Eric mentioned, you know, we serve diverse K through 12 students in Portland public schools and David Douglas and Reynolds School District, and we have an emphasis on high opportunity neighborhoods in East Portland. So we are really focused on making sure we meet the need in the community, eliminating any economic and logistical barriers that people have to success. And a third part of our program we provide is complete wraparound services for those in our care. So that looks like rental assistance, food relief, traveling assistance. We call it the COVID Relief Fund since COVID started. And we're so grateful with the help of the community, including OHA, we've been able to support our community and give out over $100,000 in direct assistance to families. So just really, really grateful for the overwhelming support from the community, but you know, there's always a need to show up and contribute on a deeper level to youth and families in our program. You know, as Eric mentioned, I am the development director, so I work and walk alongside Eric to make sure that our programs are sustained and they're able to grow deeper, right, with those that we serve. My role is to share my heart and mission with the community as it relates to this work. You know, the last thing I'll say is, I couldn't say it better than Eric, that relationships are everything. If you think about your own personal journey and what it has taken you to get to where you are today, it's really hard not to think about 1, 2, or 3 people who helped you get to this room, to help you get to this position where you can then pour out into the community. And we seek to do that to those families, those students that come under our care. Mentorship is everything, and helping them find someone that has their story that they can see themselves in, that they can feel comfortable in being vulnerable and sharing the intricacies of their lives and the burden that Black and Brown students and families have to carry with the history and the racial unrest in this country. It's just really important. Is here now more than ever, but we haven't slowed down. We keep being able to show up in the lives of those who need us and wrap our arms around them to make sure that they have everything successful. So that's in a nutshell what we do. I will probably, if you haven't seen it, I'll put our website into the chat, because you can go on there, you can see additional videos, you can see newsletters of exciting news that we have coming up with HALA. But thank you for the opportunity to share what we do and a little bit of our heart with you.
Oh, y'all are so amazing. I am just so grateful that you that I saw your billboard by the Hawthorne Bridge and connected with you all. I just am so inspired, and really hope that folks on the call today can think about how they can recreate these opportunities for relationship for youth in their communities in all parts of the state. So thank you so much. All right, we've got one more example of strategy implementation. And so I will turn it over to Alyssa McLean and Christy Munoz to introduce yourselves and share a little bit about the work you're doing to address climate resilience for priority populations. And happy to pull up your slides if that's what you'd like. That'd be helpful. Okay. All right.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, Kristen and Eric and Vicki. It was so amazing to hear about the work that you all are doing. And Christy Munoz and I are excited to be here today. My name is Alyssa McLean, and I'll be presenting with Christy. She's a colleague from the United Way of the City of Willamette. So I work at OHA, here at OHA, in the Environmental Public Health section, and I'm part of the Climate and Health team. And the Climate and Health program works to reduce the risk of climate hazards by providing scientific assessments and reports, tools and trainings, and by engaging diverse community partners in developing plans and projects that build community resilience. So that's a program that's been with OHA for a while. And is kind of the background. So the project that we'd like to share with you today is a pilot that Christy and our organizations are developing together in response to the ongoing and increasing threat of climate-related disasters in Oregon. And specifically, I'd say that this project was really born in response to the recent wildfires that impacted so much of our state this last fall. So, as you can see on the slide there, this is a project to advance equitable disaster resilience through healing-centered, culturally grounded collaborations and actions. And we're calling the project the Disaster Resilience Learning Collaborative. And our goal really is to increase disaster resilience by advancing equitable systems and strengthening relationships across community-based organizations and the public sector. And you could go to the next slide. So we are still in the planning phases of this project, and to help guide the development, we did a survey of several community-based organizations just to get an idea of their priorities and needs. And one of the open-ended questions that we asked was, what are your priorities regarding disaster resilience in your community? And this word cloud here was created using those responses. So this gives kind of a nice snapshot of what's at the top of people's minds for their needs. So the kind of the nuts and bolts of this project is that it's really using an education to action approach. So our plan is to offer a series of culturally grounded and healing informed workshops to 2 separate tracks. So there's going to be a community-based organization track and a public sector track. So they'll be kind of learning similar things, and then following the workshop, the 2 groups will have the opportunity to come together and share a dialogue about what they've learned and kind of brainstorm some paths forward, new paths forward. And then following the workshops, the community-based organizations will actually have an opportunity to apply for a mini grant where they'll be able to apply what they've learned into their organization or their community. So that's the general overview. And with that, I will pass it off to Christine Munoz to share a little bit more about our priority populations and sort of what makes this project unique. So you can go to the next slide and pass it to Christy.
Thank you, Alyssa. Hola a todos, buenos dias. My name is Christy, pronoun she, her, hers. I work with United Way of the Columbia Willamette here in the Portland, Oregon Tri-County region. I just want to extend gratitude. I know some folks here in Oregon Health Authority who've been just great partners to us, and this is such an amazing opportunity for us to deepen our relationship with this just amazing team. I did want to provide a little bit of context as well as to, you know, when we talk about this project. I just want to call in the room what happened starting last year in September and how our culturally specific and you know, really culturally specific and responsive CBOs, community-based organizations, really found themselves at the front lines of one of the biggest wildfires across our states. And a lot of these organizations, they pivoted from their regular missions to becoming emergency responders, as well as providing basic needs and social services. They really just became everything for the communities that they were representing. And I think here in this room, we understand that as the frequency and severity of climate crisis increases in our state and nationally and globally, our nonprofit partners especially are going to continue to play a role in supporting these affected communities. I also want to highlight, and this is really important for me also as a woman of color professional, that in addition to the wildfires and the global pandemic, our communities of color are being affected by white supremacy violence, lack of affordable housing, deportations, water shortages in our state's Indian reservations, isolation, just additional things that I wanted to bring to the table as to, you know, what we're facing in the front lines here. And navigating the challenges really has taken its toll on our partners, and many have reported being emotionally and mentally drained, to say the least, in the work that they're doing. So I also wanted to talk about the priority population. So in particular, our collaborative will be prioritizing Latinx and American Indian communities because these 2 groups were affected disproportionately between 2019 and 2020. Specifically with wildfire disasters and also the floods. And this slide just kind of provides a nice visual as to how we're creating the intention and the space for these CBOs to work with us in this collaborative project. So the first piece, looking at the top left, I guess, picture, we're really hoping for a multicultural space. That's an incubator for CBO leaders where there can be mutual learning, statewide networking, and just collective visioning that can steward hope as we move forward into the recovery and resilience post-disasters. And looking at the top right, I also want to highlight that this pilot is facilitated by communities of color and it's intended for communities of color. And everyone attending will also be paid for their time and for their attendance and involvement. And the bottom left just showcases we are hoping to bring in just culturally grounded practices and knowledge. So if anyone here has sat in any kind of groups within the disaster landscape, a lot of them don't pull from culturally grounded and responsive practices. So we're really hoping to bring in some of those tenets within the curriculum. And then finally, in the bottom right, as Alyssa mentioned earlier, we are going to have a grant opportunity at the very end to encourage these CBOs to also not just be applying for grants in general, but also have conversations with us and potentially revamp the idea of what a grant process looks like. So also encouraging them to maybe present instead of writing a huge, RFP or application for this, and really developing a relationship both as a funder and as a nonprofit and government entity to support them with their project moving forward. And then last but not least, it is possible that we might even have an advisory council coming out of this and surfacing out of the program. And hopefully we can start addressing some of the just equitable systemic change that we'd like to see in our state. So that's what I have for our section.
Great. Thank you so much, Christy and Alyssa. Really excited to hear the outcomes of this work. So hopefully we can figure out a way for you to share kind of the learning that comes out of this collaborative with others. Let me just check the time. Okay, it is 11:09, and I definitely want to make sure we've got time for questions as well as the breakouts. So how about we just take like 3 to 5 minutes. So for anybody who has questions for any of our presenters, our guests, now would be the time. And also, I guess, Liz or Heather, if there's anything that's come up in the chat that you want to call out.
We had one question come up from West.
And it looks like he's raised his hand, West.
Yeah, West, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like a lot of my work is around raising awareness around disability and health and environment. And so a lot of the things that I heard around advancing health equity, I think it's important to remember that that those policies and programs that serve people with disabilities are unique in their needs because of their disability. And the question or the comment that I put was really trying to emphasize intersectionality, because sometimes the policies that promote racial and ethnic justice don't necessarily also promote other kinds of justice, disability justice. And the other thing I'm trying to remember or try to tend towards is these things can work together versus being competitive. So anyhow, that was something I wanted to just raise and probably try to continue to see it implemented across programs. Thank you.
Thank you, West. Really important point.
Christy, one of the challenges that we know we face is actually, in a physical landscape perspective, is actually, data regarding people with disabilities, and there's so many different disabilities. So I really appreciate Wes raising that, and we're learning all the time at the agency, which is sort of a built environment focus that supports community cohesiveness. So West, I invite you to reach out and email me or Evan too if you would like to talk about that more. I'd be very grateful to be able to talk with you, not just the data, but just kind of what communities of people with disability you are thinking of, and we know that, you know, census far underestimates people living with disabilities. And so we're just looking for better ways to recognize that, you know, Chrissy, you may know this, but up to 40% of Oregonians self-identify as living with disabilities. So getting our arms around that as a culture is actually a major task. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. And I'll just add it, like, I want to be mindful of privilege, and that I'm not trying to, like, by saying this, not trying to compete with or create a dichotomy between leading with race. And there's a lot of things I could say about that. But happy to talk to you about the statistics and some of that stuff, and then also how to recruit and retain people with disabilities to advisory committees, because that's also a challenge.
Thank you so much.
Love the connections all. It's happening. Any other questions or comments for any of our guest presenters? Okay. Well, if y'all want to hang out for just a few more minutes, I would love to create a little bit of space for you guys to connect with each other. So I'm gonna pull up my slides here. Okay, we're gonna take, you know, 10 minutes to put you into breakout rooms. Hopefully this is just an opportunity to meet other people across the state who are interested in this work. So, you know, we'll put you into groups of like 3 or 4 people. So introduce yourselves, and then this is just an opportunity to discuss the information that you heard today, share examples of how your community is advancing the strategies and activities that we highlighted, or opportunities that you would like to bring to your community and your ideas for how to do that. So let me get you going here. And we will bring you back in like 11:25 or so. Sound good? Okay. Have fun, everybody. All right. Looks like everybody is back. I hope that was a helpful opportunity to connect. You made a new friend out there in the Zoom breakout space. We've only got 5 minutes left. But would love to hear, what you all chatted about. So I invite folks to share a takeaway in the chat, or if people are feeling brave and want to come off mute and share something you learned or an idea that was generated in the breakout rooms.
I guess I can talk. I've seen a lot of things that will help me, I guess, in our community. But I'm looking at this as the rural, because I live in a rural area. So some of the benefits that the bigger cities get, we don't get. The big thing I was talking about is transportation. We don't have a facility to transport people to a doctor's appointment or to the store for groceries. So seeing some different ways to approach, I think, might help me a little bit to try to get that, going a little bit better. But it's just in the rural area, we do not have that. And it's been really tough to get people to the doctor's appointment. So then, therefore, they can't make the doctor's appointment. Therefore, their health goes down. So getting our community more healthy and making sure that they get to their appointments has been a huge thing for me. Sorry, my name is Steve. I'm a community health worker at Bandon Community Health Center. So seeing these things from, I guess, a rural perspective to the bigger cities, where you guys do have the ability to have transportation for people. And I want to see that in the rural areas. And that's what I've been working on. Of course, housing as well. Housing is a huge thing. I think that's everywhere in the state of Oregon. But the big thing right now is transportation. Make sure that patient's healthy. The more healthy our people are, the more they get out, the more they can get to housing, the more they can do a lot of different things if we keep their health appearance down. So, anyways, thank you.
Christy, you're on mute. Looks like you're talking.
Oh, thank you, Liz. Yeah, just thank you for sharing, Steve. And yeah, just encourage you to the September 22nd, we'll be talking about housing and food, and that's actually where there's a lot of some transportation work that we'll be digging into a little bit more specifically in that session as well, if that's of interest.
So you'll be sending something out for us to be able to join that, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other ideas or takeaways from the breakout groups that want to be shared?
Well, there was just 2 of us, and we had a delightful conversation learning about each other's work.
Thanks, James. Thanks for tuning in. It's good to see you.
Yeah, same here.
And I'll just share that it seemed like our breakout session went so fast. Not everyone got a chance to talk because we all had so much to say.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback. And that's a good segue here as we wrap up our time together. Oh, forgot the polling question. Well, for next time. Given this was our first one, we do your feedback and evaluation is really important, and we'll be using that information as we prepare for future events. So Liz or Heather, if you can drop a link into the chat for an evaluation, and you can take a few minutes to fill that out. Your feedback's really important. As I mentioned, behavioral health is the next HTO in action focus. That'll be July 13th, and then housing and food on September 22nd. And all of that information and registration information is available on the website, healthoregon.org/shift.
Just a moment, please. Sorry.
We'll also find recording information there once we get that posted. We'll also send out a email to everybody who registered in the next week or two with the recording and slides too. So And then finally, the last kind of opportunity to share with you all is we have a base camp, which is an online kind of project management space. And we've got one created for each of the implementation areas. So if you are interested to join that area, that base camp, just send us an email, publichealth.policy@state.or.us. And we would love to invite you to that base camp or any of the other base camps that we have set up for the other implementation areas. And that's just another great space to continue the conversation and sharing of ideas that that were shared today. And with that, I will just say a huge thank you to all of you who joined and to our awesome presenters. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us today. It was really inspiring, and hopefully you will join us in July. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Christy.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.